Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, Republican from Texas, one of the people who questioned Ben Bernanke today. Senator Hutchison, I want to start by asking you about your question to Ben Bernanke on inflation. You're concerned that with so many special lending facilities by the Fed, a huge deficit being run up, this could fuel inflation. Ben Bernanke seemed to say, no, not at all. If anything, the Fed's looking for lower inflation. Were you satisfied with his answer?
Kathleen, I heard his answer, but I am not convinced that that isn't the big cloud on the horizon. When we're talking about the $10.6 trillion plus the trillion that we added in the stimulus, and then you have the Fed with, you see what the banks are doing, holding their money in the Fed. I'm very concerned that if all of a sudden 25% of the buyers of our debt, which are foreign governments and foreign entities, say, you know, the risk is too high, then the interest rate goes up, and that begins the inflationary spiral, and I'm very worried about it. He sort of said, look, for the next 2 years we get through this, and then we worry about it if we have to. Well, maybe that's what we have to do, but I sure think we ought to be watching it.
Is there anything you would like the Fed chairman to do right now on this front?
Well, I'm a little concerned about their continuing to pay interest to banks to hold their money at the Fed, and maybe that could be an incentive for banks not to lend out because it's safe. We all know that, but I'm a little worried about that. And also, I think that the Fed chairman actually has done a great job of being a part of the regulatory group that is trying to address the issue. And I would just like to see him jump in and realize that people are not getting credit out there, and we have to address it with all hands on deck.
So on that score, what more would you like the Fed to do, the Treasury to do? There were some very pointed questions to Ben Bernanke. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee, one of your Republican colleagues, Richard Shelby of Alabama, really seemed to be trying to get Ben Bernanke to address what they see as the issue of creeping nationalization. He said, no, we're embarking on this is a public-private partnership. We're just trying to get enough capital to the banks so they can lend. He really seemed to be saying, no, that's not the road we're going down, nationalization.
Well, I thought that was good. I was glad that he said we're not going to do that. And he also said, I think this is if we can address the banks first, then in a couple of years, by the end of 2010, we're going to start seeing this turn around. That was the hopeful thing that he said. But the key is we have just passed a stimulus package that is adding another $1 trillion to the debt. Why didn't we take up the bank regularization and stabilization first? Why wasn't that the first thing, along with housing, that we addressed, and then see where we needed to put money into the system that may or may not be stimulative?
Now, you know a bit about banking. You were the general counsel for what was once the largest bank holding company in Texas, Republic Bancorp. When you look at what the authorities are doing now, the Fed and the Treasury, the stress testing, perhaps public-private participation to buy toxic debt, all these steps, are these the right steps now to get the banks on track, or are you one who's in favor of saying some of the big banks are insolvent and should be taken over, nationalized, broken up, whatever?
I am more of the theory, which was actually Hank Paulson's first theory, and that is that we take the bad assets off, let the good assets in the bank free up the banks and encourage them to lend, and then try to work out those bad debts. I think the key, though, is not to do what Resolution Trust Corporation did and really just have fire sales and bring down the value of everything around a debt, but instead to work it out. And I think if you have the mission of working out the loans in the bad debt side and you have the upside for the taxpayer, that's the answer.
President Obama addresses the nation tonight. What do you expect him to hear? How do you think Republicans will respond?
Well, I certainly know that he will try to assure the American people that he and his team are working on the economic issues. It's on everyone's mind, and I think he will address that. And I think the Republicans will answer him with Governor Jindal talking about not only the short term, but the long term, and trying to get our economy right by doing what's right and not perhaps getting us into a worse situation down the road.
I guess you foreshadowed some of those questions today with your issues on the debt and the deficit. Senator Hutchison, thank you for joining us. That was the Republican Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison of Texas. Lori and Mark, sending it back to you in our New York studio.